Well, I'm camping, so if anyone watched the video we did last night with Las Vegas Tri Club Spotlight, I'm wearing the same shirt. I meant to.
You're by yourself, right?
What's that?
You're camping by yourself, so who
Yes,
cares?
definitely. There would not be, otherwise I would have definitely have had to change my shirt.
That's I didn't I didn't want to segue into our podcast so quick, but a budgeting thing is just own one shirt.
Yes, that's
Right?
right.
It's really it's a lot cheaper. Just so you know, this is my last Athletic Brewing upside down golden ale.
Yeah.
And so I told Marie, my wife, that this might be our last podcast because I said last week that if we didn't get a sponsorship, and she's like, I'm gonna go buy you more beer. I'm like, no, that doesn't count. She's like, I'll sponsor you. And I'm like, well, I guess like she's been sponsoring me for a long time. So.
Well, good news. They do have a table here, and I did stop by to the table, and I did ask them about sponsoring the Las Vegas Tri Club and our podcast. Yep. And they right away reached out to someone in California, and then the person in California said, get his contact information. So I gave her my contact information, and now this has sort of happened before, and then it wouldn't go anywhere. So now I'm going to go back tomorrow, and I'm going to talk with her again, and hopefully the same person's there, and then follow up. So, well, who knows? We'll see.
If you can bring back 6 of the yellow ones, we'll go 6 more weeks.
That's a partial sponsorship.
That's all I'm asking for is one beer a week. That's not exorbitant for the amount of airtime we've given them.
I love it. Well, I love, promoting the non-alcoholic beer is because I know there's people out there who struggle with alcohol and have in some cases beat the struggle, and congratulations to them. And so it is nice to promote a non-alcoholic version.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you ran into them. That's really good. So, hey, so you're down in Arizona. A lot of people racing down in Arizona this weekend from Las Vegas and from the West Coast. It's sold out, right? It was a sold out race.
I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't be surprised. It typically does, but it's the last year, the 70.3.
I know it's really interesting that we have a sellout race, and because oftentimes it's the races that end up going away are the ones that don't have good participation. But I mean, this is a race that it gets good numbers. So any inside word down there on why?
It's usually someone within the city organization gets too many complaints about traffic buildup or closures or difficulty commuting on that day or maybe the day before. And sometimes that just wears down the welcome of an event like this. And so that sometimes happens at these size cities, trying to get road closures and get permits. And that's why the map that the race covers, the square footage is much smaller, because it's just a matter of how do you fit a race within a city that people are mobile and they really want to be able to go. And so I think that's what's going on with this race. So.
Well, I'd wish they'd do the same thing with the F1 in Las Vegas, because I can't get across the strip anymore. It's taking me 50 minutes to get to work.
Yeah.
It is like blowing my mind that we're going to do this for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, I may have to quit work because I can't handle the traffic anymore. And, I'm still recovering from my surgery and I'm not riding my bike in. I think if I was riding my bike in, it might be better.
Right.
But
maybe, but then you'd have more agitated drivers too.
Exactly. That's true.
Well, I was able to tour the F1 facility, the finish line and grandstand area last Wednesday, just a couple of days ago. And I'm sitting there, I'm walking around the facility. I'm like, you guys got a race in a month. This doesn't look ready. But it's like one of those things where everything will just all of a sudden come together, and it's supposed to be a pretty phenomenal area. And it is, the footprint that they have is pretty amazing. So it's going to be neat to see that come to town. Now, the good news is they talked about that they don't do the repavement of the streets every year. they would do maybe every 2 or every 3 years, depending on how the condition is. But they need to lay down almost 18 inches of asphalt for these cars.
I really just wish they'd have a bike race the week before.
Yeah, right.
You know, wouldn't that be awesome? Or one of the mornings, just open it up on that perfect pavement.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be so fun? If it's like it's a 3.5 mile track and just on perfect pavement. Oh my gosh. They could sell, like, seriously, like people would pay a lot of money, I think, to ride that on their bikes.
Well, build in a pool, like they've done that down in that area. Put a pool in there. Let's do a triathlon.
Exactly.
Wow.
Or even, because it'd be perfect even to do a run, you know, like, so it would be so good. Well, let's talk. Speaking of that, we were talking about budget. Those people seem like they have no budget.
Yeah,
they're spending literally billions of dollars to F1 to Las Vegas. But let's talk about triathlon, and let's talk about budgeting for triathlon. It's something we really haven't talked about. In, I guess, the altogether, we've talked about the price of things, and this came to a head a little bit when we were meeting with the Las Vegas UNLV Triathlon Club, and starting to figure out how much it costs, like a college kid, to basically get up and running, and go and even like just go to a race, and it's expensive. Like we're doing an expensive sport, even on a shoestring budget. Traveling to a race, or even a local race,
right?
If you don't have much, like you don't have, let's say you're starting from nothing, and you wanted to do Pumpkin Man next weekend, and you had nobody donating anything to you, just ballpark, John, how much do you think it would cost to basically get you to the to be able to do it? If you started with nothing and you had to buy everything.
Okay, no one to lend you anything.
No one's lending you anything, and you're going to go as cheap as you can, but still to a point where you can enjoy it.
All right.
So, and why I said that is because, like, I don't think you can enjoy that without a wetsuit, because it's going to be the water's going to be pretty cold.
Yeah. Has it dropped down pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say, just off the top of my head, to do swim, bike, and run with a wetsuit, with a decent bike and helmet, and then running, shoes. Maybe you bike in your running shoes to save some cost. You're probably still looking at $1,500 to $2,000, and now you've got to do your entry fee, and then if it's a local race, obviously that saves travel dollars at that point. But you still need a tank of gas. So I'm going to say $1,500 to $2,000. What do you say?
I'm thinking right about the same, and that's getting yourself, a really cheap bike.
Yeah.
And I think that we in the triathlon community need to recognize the expense of getting into the sport. And we've talked about it before, and you and I both lent stuff to people.
Right.
I've lent wetsuits, you've lent wetsuits, I've lent bikes, you've given bikes, right? Like, if we truly want to, grow the sport, we need to think of ways to help mitigate that price, especially, entering into the triathlon. It's because it's one thing to sit around with your friends, maybe you have some friends that are runners, and say, hey, why don't you do a triathlon?
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know, I'm not a good swimmer. Well, you can overcome that. Right? But I don't have $1,500 like to do like a triathlon one time. And I think we need to be really aware, like as a community, we need to be aware of this. And you and I, John, like we're at a point now where we have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like the main thing for us, especially in a local race, is just the entry fee and a tank of gas to get down there, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and here's where I would put a plug in for the Las Vegas Tri Club. Yeah. We have kept the same membership fees for probably the last 10 years. And with a membership fee for individuals, $65, a family of 4, they have to be a family, it's $85, not 4 different people, it's for a family. And then we've also started a collegiate membership, which I think we did $50. And with the idea that, we're trying to cut the cost there for them as much as we can. And we offer 4 events, all free when you're a member, which means if you do all 4 events and you paid $65, what's that? 4 into 65, that's $14 a race. You can't beat it. It's the best deal in town. Now, we don't have all the bells and whistles that you get at a bigger event, but you do get that community. And I think that this is something you're speaking to, is a gateway into the sport is to do things like club races, whether it's here in Las Vegas or if someone's listening in another city and they've got a club there, check out what they have for club events. That's sometimes the least expensive way to get started. And you can also start with probably a bigger range of equipment and not feel like you're the only one doing that, because we get all sorts of people doing our club events, borrowed bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes that have a basket on the front, things, whatever bike people can get, they're showing up with, and that's okay. And we embrace everyone that comes in, because it's a start. And once you get started, then you can start adding equipment as you get deeper into the sport.
Yeah, and I think that you're like the way to mitigate the cost in general is to have these clubs, right? And I mean, obviously just speaking of our tri club, but I've been on the Facebook page of other tri clubs as well, and there are people sharing equipment, right? And hey, I need a wetsuit for this weekend or next weekend. It's my first race. And it's amazing how many people are like, oh yeah, I've got an old wetsuit I can lend you or even give you. Bikes the same way. So I think that that's a really good way to help mitigate the cost. We talked about it before. My first triathlon, a friend of my wife's, she lent me a bike. And that really helped me, because I wasn't going to go, like my plan originally was to do one triathlon. Right. Which a lot of people, that is right. I've signed up for one triathlon. I'm going to do this and then I'm done. That didn't work out so well.
Right.
But if I didn't have that bike, I don't know, I don't know if I would have done it. And it was a nice bike, which helped. I mean, because it wasn't like a Walmart bike. Not that there's anything wrong with doing a triathlon on a Walmart bike. You totally could. But it was an older bike, but it was nice and it was in good shape. And that made a difference as well. And it was a non-wetsuit swim.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. You got to getting engaged with the community, because there is a lot of exchanging of equipment, borrowing equipment. I saw a post even this morning. Someone said, hey, looking to go do this, I think it was Cabo. And someone right away wrote, and the person didn't even ask about it. The person wrote and offered, hey, if you need a bike bag, I can loan you this. Which right there, that's a $500 expense, to go buy a bike bag, maybe more, depending on what kind of bag you get. So it is really neat to be part of the community, and then being the receiver of that, but then also being the giver of equipment is really a good feeling.
And I think sometimes people are shy to ask. But I got to be honest with you, every time I've lent something to somebody, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, right.
Right, like
it's part of their journey.
Exactly. I've lent so much stuff out to people, and every time I've gotten it back. Right. One time, like I lent a bike bag and a wheel got broken, and the person, they went and they got it fixed, and and I'm like, oh, like I understand, like it was no big deal, like stuff happens, but like I'm just I encourage people that are listening to this to like in your local tri club to ask. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of people like you and I that it actually makes us feel really good to help people and to help break down these barriers.
And it does help you become part of their journey, and that's a good feeling to have. So maybe we actually lay out some of the costs. It adds up really fast.
It really does. So now I'm going to ask you another question. Okay. So let's assume you went to Finland this year, or I went to Finland this year. How much money do you think, like in all reality, just you spend a year into triathlon?
Spend during a year?
A calendar year.
I was thinking about that, but I was thinking probably a little differently than you. I was like, you know what? I'm spending money on triathlon. that if I wasn't doing triathlon, I would spend the money
Oh
differently.
yeah. Yeah, this is entertainment, right? This is our
Yeah,
entertainment and our health.
yeah.
Um, so like maybe you don't want to answer, which is fine if you don't want to answer.
No, I didn't come up with a dollar figure, but the training adds up a lot. Whether it's memberships, subscriptions, nutrition when you're training those long days. I think I've done that before where I sat there, I was like, this ride is costing me $20 in food. I'm like, why am so now you start making decisions. Well, maybe I don't need the $5 goo every time, and you start to figure out what the budget kicks in at that point. But yeah, it's an expensive adventure to get to a start line. I don't have a number. Did you do a number?
Okay, this really depends on if you buy a bike that year or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a major expense.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna guess it once again. Let's say I do one international trip, which I historically do one international trip.
Right.
Usually do two trips within North America.
Mm-hmm.
And this is trying to be relatively budget conscious.
Yeah.
I'm going to say $15,000.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's without buying a bike that year.
Mm-hmm.
When I add up, I was thinking about all those things you just said, like adding up just like the nutrition for training.
Yeah.
Adding up tires and tubes and all of the little things that add up to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's expensive.
So
And
is that 15K on top of the trip, or
no, I'm saying including travel.
okay, including travel. Okay.
If you do an international trip, I mean, that's, this year, if we would have went to Finland, it was going to be like 6,000 or 7,000.
Yeah.
Now I don't count if my wife went with me, right?
Right.
Like I'm just saying like my part of it, because she'd
Right.
come with me as like a vacation more than,
Mm-hmm.
but and so if you think about it, in life, many people keep a budget,
Mm-hmm.
right? And financial wellness and financial literacy is really important. And one of the things is to obviously keep a budget. And that's a big chunk of my disposable income that goes to this. And like you said, if I wasn't spending it on that, I would be spending it on something else.
That's right.
Like we don't go on vacations to like Club Med,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't go to the spa, and I don't do a lot of things like, because I'm too damn tired, to be honest with you, to do a lot of other things. And but still, I think it's important to actually to start to think about a budget for the year.
Mm-hmm.
And as we come to the conclusion of this year, I think that one of the things that I need to do, and I need to do a better job of, is actually budgeting this out.
Mm-hmm.
And what really kind of brought this to my attention was, I haven't been doing triathlon, right? So since the summer, or since like basically my last triathlon was in the end of June, after my surgery and stuff. And my wife's like, man, we're doing really well financially all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, probably because I'm not spending money like crazy on triathlon.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
well, and the truth is I would have, we didn't go to Finland. That would have been expensive. I planned to go to Arizona to that race. I probably would have went to another race. I planned on going to Daytona to the long course nationals.
Right.
All of those things didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just once again, just if we think of entry fees,
Mm-hmm.
right, for the fall races, because I would have done Las Vegas Tri, I would have done Pumpkin Man, those two longer distance races, that'd been $1,000 just in race entry.
Yeah, right. Easy.
And in a weekend in Arizona, I don't stay in a trailer because my wife won't let me. That is going to be, by the time you add gas and a place to stay and food and everything, it's going to be $1,000.
Easy. Yeah. Easy.
Mm-hmm. And so anyways, I really started thinking about when she said that, and I'm like, yeah, like I do spend a lot of money on triathlon, and next year my goal is to actually budget everything out. Mm-hmm. And what I'd really like to do next year, honestly, is just see exactly how much I spent.
Yeah. Well, that would be interesting because it's also interesting to see what your normal expenses actually tie into
Right.
a triathlon. There's a little bit of double dipping there. But I'm going to go back to what you said earlier about, the money that you're saving this year because you're not doing as much. I think very much like you is, my wife and I were talking about, getting a membership at a club to be able to have more access to pool hours and what have you, this or that. And she told me the price, and I'm like, that's $4,500 a year. All right, that's a lot of free disposable razors to go in and get.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? Rather than spend that money, because I can go swim at a multi-gen or even at the UNLV pool, for much cheaper. I said, let's take that money and let's go do a trip. And
Yeah.
so I'm already thinking, all right, if we're okay with spending the money for this, let's spend it for that instead. So I think it is funny how, on one hand, we look at the expenses that we have with a sport that we love doing, but if we weren't spending the money there, we most likely would be putting it into another bin. But it adds up, and no doubt about it. And this is why you and I have talked a lot about trying to figure out how to help people enter the sport, and in this case specifically, the college triathlon kids, because they're brand new to the sport. The sticker price will scare everyone away, and it's not sustainable.
Especially a college student.
Yeah, right.
'Cause these are not college students that are like sponsored or they're not on scholarship for triathlon or anything. That they're paying their own way.
Yeah.
And it's triathlon has a problem of we don't have a lot of kids, and we don't have a lot of like the age group from from being a kid until about 30. There's not a lot of participation. And we want to encourage that participation, and the way you and I are doing it is trying to help the UNLV Triathlon Club do that. But yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a real big challenge.
So I know we want to lay down some costs, which I think is good, and then maybe we can even talk about ways that we try to alleviate the fees in some way. Obviously, I'm camping.
Yeah,
I'm camping because it's less expensive than getting a room down at Tempe. So, in fact, I got to do a shout out for Jeff Monroe because I'm camping on his property just north of Tempe. So thank you, Jeff.
Well, that's awesome. Oh, that's super awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's kind of break down like our key expenses and the major things that we would, or a triathlete would spend money on. So the easiest one to think of is the race entry fees.
Yeah.
And everyone's complaining all the time about how expensive races are. And they are. Like, there's no two ways about it. Your local races, if can run a couple $100.
Yeah.
Right. A race that you're at now, $400 about for a 70.3, about 400, maybe, depending on when you sign up.
Yeah.
And then if we go to like an Ironman, I don't even know, John, 900.
Yeah, they're anywhere. It depends on the race, but anywhere from the low cost would be around $500 to $1,000.
Yeah. Just to enter the race.
Yeah.
So that's a big cost. Now let's actually, as we do this, let's talk about maybe ways to mitigate the cost. So the number one way is to sign up early. Right.
Sign up early. Yeah.
So but this is also the really difficult part. When you sign up early and then something happens and you can't race, you lose the money.
Yeah.
And that's, for you and I both, we didn't go to Finland. That was $675 race entry that we don't get back.
And this is where it's important in the triathlon world. There's not typically a transfer policy where you can transfer your entry and sell it to someone else. Running, there's more running races that allow that, but in triathlon, that's not allowed. For the most part, it's not. And so you're right, signing up early, you're committing to get this done. And typically the refund policy, if you withdraw, is not very good either. You'll get maybe 10, maybe 15% back on your entry fee. So it is it is a serious commitment when you do put the money down to sign up for an event. The other part to mitigate the cost, though, is to look for discount codes. Now,
Yep.
big races like Ironman, or I would imagine Alcatraz is this way, or these big name races, they don't have discount codes.
Right.
Most local races will have some discount codes, or they'll have at least a tiered system where the earlier you get in, as we're talked about, you're going to have a lower entry fee. But a lot of times you can find a discount code for a local race, like for example, a Las Vegas Tri Club. If you have membership, you have access to a discount code for BBSC races, and we've done other races as well. And that can help knock off maybe 10%, maybe 20% of the entry fee, which if it's $100, you're saving $20 at that point.
And that corporation has a pretty good transfer policy. I think you can transfer to another race. Right.
Which company?
EBSC.
Yeah, especially the local companies. I think they're more, they have more options typically than the big national brands.
Yeah. And then, with Ironman in particular, they have moved to that Flex 90.
Yeah.
So if you sign up for a race within the first 90 days, it's offered, then you can transfer.
Yeah.
And there's some options as far as transferring. So, I told myself I wasn't going to sign up for any races until I was healthy, but I signed up for St. George on the last day to get that because I know that I can transfer it out.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is a good way to kind of protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of an insurance policy. And then some of the races also have secondary insurance.
Yeah.
That you can actually buy.
Mm-hmm.
It costs more to add that secondary insurance, but it also protects you for that side of if you can't actually do the race. Because the truth of the matter is, triathletes get injured.
Yeah.
Right. Or get sick, or things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something to consider when you're doing your budget.
No, for sure. And those are the pros and cons. And when you pick a race out long term, you got to be looking at what's the family situation going to be, yep. what's work going to be, and trying to plan around or predict those social things that could pop up. Because the worst case is you've got a race planned, and all of a sudden you've got to go to a family reunion or something, and it conflicts with the date. So good to explore your yearly calendar as you start to plan out events.
Okay, so the next big one is equipment.
Yeah.
Right? And the biggest one is bikes.
Yeah.
And bikes and bike parts, bike maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about, John, if you didn't do your own work on your bike,
yeah,
how much would it cost to maintain your bike at a local bike shop?
I think you're probably spending a couple $100 each month to keep it, maybe change the chain, recalibrate the brakes, adjust the shifting, all those little tweaks that you can learn to do on your own, but you're probably $100 to $200 into it. In terms of checking out. Well, right before this race, I had to run my wheels over to the bike store and have them check my hubs because I was cleaning my wheels, and I didn't like how it was rubbing. I don't mess around with the hubs much. That I go to a bike store for, because I feel they have the better equipment to deal with that than I do. And they quickly addressed it, and they were super nice, and they got it done. And so there are times where you need to go to a bike store, and it's good to have a good relationship with a bike store.
No, I totally agree. But one of the ways you can save money is to learn how to maintain your own bike.
Yep.
One of the things that we've talked about before that you and I both do, we do a lot of our own bike maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it takes time to do it, and it takes time to learn it, but you can learn anything. Yeah. This is not like working on bikes it's not, you're not working on an F1 car, right? There are some things you need to know, but there's lots of sources.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much just from watching YouTube videos on bike maintenance. So I agree with you. Like it would probably be $150 to $200 a month if I every time I needed something done,
Yeah.
I went to the bike shop. Plus, you're going to be without your bike sometimes for potentially an extended period of time.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So, and then just go ahead.
And what would you say are the key maintenance things? I would say cleaning your chain and your drivetrain, the whole system is probably one of the number one things that people need to learn to maintain their bike.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Number one is keeping your bike clean.
Yep.
Like, and it's because it's not just your drivetrain clean is good, but there are other parts, especially around your handlebars,
Yep.
that we sweat onto, we spill Gatorade on. Those things can rust and bolts can break, and so that's one. And then you and I've talked about this before. Even like just making sure your bolts are torqued to the right.
Yeah.
Specs, especially if you're working with the carbon fiber bikes. I think that can help. But yes, definitely keeping the drivetrain clean, and even the drivetrain, especially the rear derailleur and actually the front derailleur too, in alignment.
Yeah.
Right? Because if things are a little bit out of alignment, it actually will wear the chain out quicker, and it'll wear out your cassettes and even your chain rings in the front.
Yep.
And so, one of the things that I notice, like when I'm riding them, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. And so I'll go and I'll tweak it and I'll try and make it sound. My thing, and this is a little, thing about bike maintenance, is making it as quiet as possible.
That's right.
Because quiet means less friction.
Yep. Sound is bad.
Sound in your drivetrain is bad.
Yeah.
And figuring out the sounds and not being, and it's one thing when you're out in the middle of a ride and something starts. Okay, when I get home, like I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that actually can help lower your costs long term.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is this is a weird one, but like actually changing your chain on a regular basis will keep your drivetrain in shape as well. Because the chain is meant to be replaced. We've talked about this before.
Right.
For sure every year. And then you and I, we talked about, we have race chains.
Yep.
We have chains specifically for racing, but my training chain is an old race chain, but after a year, I get rid of that. And once again, it's just to keep the drivetrain healthy.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Let's keep going with the equipment, because if we're on the bike, the equipment just is almost endless what you can get. And, dollars and cents, you can spend a lot of money in a lot of different areas, but something that you've been really good at advocating people buy and don't worry about spending the money on it is a good helmet. Yep. And I think that is a cost that seems hard to pay up front, but it's a cost that is critical to have a right fitting helmet, and a helmet that's going to protect you if you do crash. And we know there's two kinds of cyclists, those who have crashed and those who are going to. So everyone will eventually crash, and to have a good helmet, and the higher cost helmet will last you years. It won't be a cost that you have every year.
And we've talked about it before, but have a look at the Virginia Tech helmet website.
Yep.
Which does independent testing. Look for a 5-star helmet. They range in price as low as $70 to up to a couple hundred or higher. But don't spare expense on that.
Right.
And once again, don't buy a used helmet.
Right.
Or an old helmet.
No.
For sure. And then so when we talk about equipment, John, you did mention that it's almost on a bike, it's almost unlimited how much you could spend.
It is.
Right. But what do you think, like, let's not say your first race, but let's say somebody is doing triathlon, they're kind of like a middle of the road person. What do you think the cost they would probably need to spend to have a decent triathlon bike?
A decent triathlon bike? New?
Not like you're buying the bike that they're racing at Kona, right? Like just the average, if we tomorrow or maybe on Sunday, if you looked at the average triathlon bike at 70.3 Arizona,
Okay, so yeah, if someone's
Other-
getting into it, I'd say go used, as
Agreed.
because bikes don't hold their value. And so you can get a lot more bike for used bike, but it's used. And I would just ask questions. Has this been crashed? Have you had any issues with it that you know about? How's it shift? Things like that. So if we're going down to 70.3 tomorrow, where there's all the bike check-in, I would venture to guess that those bikes are probably averaging $3,000 to $4,000 for this race. Some races, I mean, you go down there and the bikes can average 10,000 because of all the other gear, the power meter you put on, the special cranks you put on, the wheel sets that people use, the tires that they use, the helmet, all the pedals themselves, that all adds up, and you're very quickly crossing that $10,000 line. But I think that here at Tempe, there's probably a bigger range of people doing the event. And I would say the average bike is going to be somewhere around 3,000 to 5,000.
And this is a tough one, right? Like I've talked to people about this where, literally talked to somebody it was about a month ago, about buying his first triathlon bike.
Yeah.
And he said, well, how much do I need to spend? And I'm like, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I'd like to at some point, like do a full Ironman. And I'd like to, qualify for 70.3 worlds. I have some pretty big aspirations. And I'm like, honestly, you're going to be looking at it for a used bike that if you really want to take this quite seriously, you're looking at $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
If you add in and that's adding in the wheels.
Right.
And he's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
His road bike, he said, I think he spent $800 on it. And I was like, okay, this is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And now we can look older. Like you can look at maybe even like a 10-year-old bike.
And
you might be able to get a triathlon bike, for $1,000.
Yeah. Right.
So you can go, once again, if you go used and you go older, but there's also, especially if you go to a carbon fiber bike, there is carbon fatigue that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are cracks that can happen in the carbon that you can't see. And so there's questions that need to be asked. You mentioned, asking questions. I also would mention that there's a lot of bike shops that will do a courtesy, basically look at your bike for safety.
Okay.
So they call them safety checks. So if you want to buy somebody's bike, like, hey, can we meet at the local bike shop? And talk to them already and say, I want them, like a professional mechanic,
Yeah.
to look at the bike and tell me, is this in good working order? What's going to need to be replaced relatively quickly? Are all of the cables all rusted? And
Yeah.
how much is this going to cost for me to make it safe and actually something I'll enjoy riding? And I think that's a good thing. I know people do that with cars, right? They have a mechanic look it over. It's a pretty good idea to do with a bike as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great suggestion, and take advantage of the expertise and build that relationship with that bike shop. So that's a good way to start doing that.
And some people feel like, and I've talked to them, oh, I don't want to bring it to the bike shop because they want to sell a bike. I'm like, yeah, but they want to develop a relationship as well, right? Especially if you're relatively new and you're going to be asking them to do a lot of the work on the bike. They make money by doing work on, doing work on bikes. They don't make money just by selling new bikes. So,
yeah. Well, and I've been known to tip my bike mechanics too. So.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Bike mechanics happy.
No, I tip my bike mechanic when I've taken my bike to a shop. I always tip them.
Yeah, because they're doing something that I typically don't have the skill set to do, and it's just important to have those people around and supporting the local bike shop. So bike weekend, like you said, it's endless. We can keep going on.
Yeah,
shoes, even the gear that you wear, clothing you wear, gloves, glasses. Oh my goodness, it's just so much. On swimming, it's a little simpler, but not that. Again, you can keep adding things to it. Obviously, your goggles, which can go anywhere from a $4 pair of goggles to, I don't know, $200 is probably the highest anyone's spending on goggles. That's the heads up display goggles.
Yeah.
But goggles will typically run $20 to $40. Swimsuit, obviously, maybe a cap, but once you start doing your racing, then you start getting the caps and you don't need to buy caps anymore.
Yeah.
And then any other gear like pull buoy, fins.
Yeah. No, and the biggest one is the wetsuit.
Yeah.
Right. And you may never need one. You could
Mhm.
say, I'm only going to do races that are in warmer water.
Yeah.
Or you can train in cold water and you can basically, get away without it. Even like a Pumpkin Man, when the water's gonna be cold, there'll be people without wetsuits.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can survive without a wetsuit.
Mhm.
But the thing with wetsuits is the same thing, right? Like the top wetsuits now are like $1,800,
Yeah.
right? But you
You
can
don't
get
need
one.
to spend that.
You
Yeah.
can get one for $150.
Yeah. Easily. Mhm.
And once again, used.
Yep.
Right? Wetsuits are amazing. Like they actually last a long time if people have taken
Mhm.
care of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a wetsuit doesn't have to be a barrier, a big barrier to entry.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so in general, like swimming equipment is relatively inexpensive.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I'll say there's a couple of tricks. One is with the wetsuit, I have a race wetsuit and I have a training wetsuit. And the training one, I don't worry about as much because I'm taking it down to Lake Mead. It's getting more use, but my race one gets set aside and that's for race day. And so I'm actually saving money in the long term by putting that race wetsuit off to the side. And then I buy a cheaper, type of wetsuit that it doesn't really matter, if you will. And then the other way that you can sort of mitigate the cost is keep your goggles clean.
Yep.
And what I do is when I buy a new pair of goggles, I keep them dry in between swims, and then I go as long with the goggles as I can until it starts to fog up, probably within 800 meters. And once it starts fogging up in 800 meters, I know the fog resistance is film or whatever the stuff is they put in the goggles that you bought. Then I start cleaning them, and I'll just take them after the swim, maybe once a week or once every other week. Take some baby shampoo and I just start rinsing them out, washing the inside and the outside of the lens, rinse them out really good. And next time you go swimming, they're going to be beautifully clear. And the key is to rinse them out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then my one key on that one is I buy my goggles on Black Friday. And oftentimes I've been able to get 3 for 1 and
Yeah.
I'll buy like a year's worth of, maybe 4 or 5 pairs.
Mhm.
Then I don't even care as much, right? Because I didn't, and I'm talking like $20 pair, but now I'm being 3 pairs for 20.
That's
I think
good.
I've done that a few times.
Mhm.
And I think that's a good way also. It's like when you do get a good deal on something like that is buy because this goggles are somewhat disposable. Even if you take
Mhm.
really good care of them, eventually, the seals and stuff go. And so, absolutely.
Especially in the Vegas heat, if you leave them in the car, the rubber components will get dried out really quick, and all of a sudden your strap is breaking or your seal is breaking, and it's just take good care of the goggles, and you'll get a longer life out of them.
Okay, let's talk about running. Expenses of running. There's only really one.
Really, yeah. I mean, you got your clothes and hat, but it is the shoes, boy.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy, that we've got to a point where we're spending $250, $275 on a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Right? When I started triathlon, which is now 14 years ago, I think like the high end was like $80, maybe 100 at the very most. So inflation in shoes has been crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. You definitely don't need the $275 pair of shoes.
No.
This is another one where I'll buy last year's model.
Yeah, right.
Right. Because the technology doesn't change that fast.
Mhm.
Even like, we talked about super shoes and the carbon plated shoes. You can, if you look around, you can buy last year's models for like half price.
Yeah.
And I am perfectly fine running last year's model. I don't care. Like
Mhm.
that's a savings that I can make. And I do have just like the other thing is I do have some race shoes that
Mhm.
I only wear racing.
That's right.
Right.
Mhm.
Like I literally have a pair of shoes like upstairs right now that they've been they're like 6 months old and they've been ran in 3 times. Right.
Mhm.
I only race in them.
Yep.
And they'll last me the full year, and then they might go into the training rotation the next year.
Right. Right.
But like you with your wetsuits, I have that. Do you have that too? Do you have a shoe that's your race shoe that you really only wear when you race? Maybe I'll also run it the week before, like
That's right. Right.
during that week, just to kind of get my foot used to
Yep.
it. But that's a special day, like a special thing. And it's kind of like it's fun, like when you go into your race shoe, like, oh yeah, this is like
Oh, totally.
extra bouncy and yeah.
Well, some of the higher end shoes, they are notorious for breaking down quicker. And so it is nice to do a race and then put them aside, then use a training shoe, and then the training shoe is what you're wearing down. And then the week of the race, go run in that shoe again. Just make sure that your body remembers how to do that. And then you're good to go. And you'll extend the life of that high-end shoe much longer. But the training shoe, boy, I tell you, it's worth the money to get a good training shoe, and it's worth buying a couple of pairs and being ready to replace before they really get worn down. And that's the biggest cost of running, is replacing the training shoes, more so than even purchasing the racing shoe, because you can extend that life out, for a number of races. But your training shoe, as I even look at my calendar, I start thinking about, when am I going to have to replace my shoes? After this race, I'm going to have a pair ready to start running in as a new pair, trying to get back into training for the next event.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. Okay, so we have other expenses, so training expenses.
Yeah.
And so things like coaching.
Yeah.
A lot of people have coaches. I coach people.
Mhm.
This can be really expensive. I know there's triathlon coaches out there that charge $1,000 a month,
Yeah.
and that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of money,
Mhm.
right? You can also just buy a book and just have go off of a plan or a plan on the internet. So there's a big range in coaching.
Mhm.
You don't have to have a coach,
Right.
but it's something that when you're budgeting, you want to think about. Now, the people that I coach, don't think about that. Just keep paying me.
All right. Right.
I'm teasing, but
Mhm.
it needs to go into the thought process.
Mhm.
And having a good coach and paying somebody that is actually helping you and helping
Yep.
keeping you healthy and mentoring you throughout the race season can be a great investment in yourself. But it's part of the cost.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of triathletes take the sport up as an adult, and they don't have a sporting background,
Right.
endurance world to be able to build on and use that experience in triathlon. And so it makes a lot of sense to get someone who's going to help you with that journey, so you're making fewer mistakes, especially early on in your triathlon journey. And not only a coach, but you might even want a nutritionist, someone
Yeah.
who's going to help you with knowing what nutrition decisions you should be making, how you should be making them, because nutrition is such an important part to all aspects of triathlon, not just competing and what you're eating during, but what your regular diet consisting of. And having a nutritionist that costs money as well.
And then you already mentioned about like gym memberships.
Yeah.
Place to swim,
Mhm.
place to maybe in the winter do like spin classes if that's
Yep.
something that you like to do. In you setting up your own gym.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? Like right beside me here, I've got an indoor bike with a trainer and a climbing thing. I've got a treadmill with a unweighting system. I hate to say this, I got like no one knows where I live. I got 10 grand sitting right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in my own personal, like my home gym,
Right.
right? Plus, I have a gym membership that I go and work out. Now, I'll tell you, I save money on my gym membership, John, because I work out at the community center. They go to a gym there. I just signed up for my 6 month renewal. It's $84 for 6 months.
Oh, there you go. That's nice.
You can't beat $84 for
That's
6
right.
months.
That's right.
So, I considered going to the really expensive gym, and I was like, you know what, I'll stick to the $84.
Yeah,
And then my personally, where I swim, if I swim with the masters group, it's $60 a month,
Yeah, right.
and that's one thing, that's coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then often I swim on my own, just at the community pool, and it's either, depending where I go, either $1 or $2
Mm-hmm.
for a swim, and I consider that I mean, that's a good deal.
Yeah, it is. That's great.
But they're closed on Sundays.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I stick with my university pool too for Sunday.
Yeah.
It's about the only pool that's open.
And it's, and here's the thing. Next time I talk to my local representatives on the city council, which I'm going to, why would they be closed on Sundays when people have time off
Yeah.
to spend with their family, to spend with their kids at a pool?
Yeah.
It's interesting, but Monday is some random time at 10 o'clock in the morning, the pool's open when nobody.
I understood why car dealerships were closed on Sunday. I don't know if they still are, but they were in Vegas.
Close on Monday.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then they should.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Right.
close on Monday and Tuesday and be open on Sunday. You'd make more money. And it's interesting. It's, to me, like, especially the public pools, it's like literally access for the public is, when do people do stuff on the weekends? But anyways, I'm gonna that's my note, my advocacy for swimming. I'm gonna see what I can do to get the pools open. Plus, they always complain they can't find people for being lifeguards, but a lot of their lifeguards are kids in school. Well, they're not in school on Sunday.
Yep.
So there you go. That's there's my rant for the day. The other really interesting expense, I know a lot of people do, is training camps.
Yeah, right.
So I know people sign up and they do training camps. These things can be super expensive.
They can be.
Some are like $4,000 or $5,000 a week.
Yep.
I've never done one, through a company. I do training camps, self-funded.
Right.
Just drive down to California for the week and ride and run and swim in different places. I personally really enjoy that. It's a thing that I do regularly, 3 or 4 times a year. I do that. But that adds up. Fortunately, I look at that as my vacation, and
Yeah.
but training camps can be quite expensive.
They can be, and they can be effective too, where you get that high intensity learning situation in a short period of time. It's not necessarily the training that you're getting, that you are getting the benefit of that, but those are more learning opportunities that you can then carry forward into through the rest of the year.
Well, and there's something to be said about like having a training block where you don't have work.
Yeah.
Right. So where you actually take a week, and the only thing you have to worry about is triathlon and rest. And like some of these high end, I've looked at some of them, training camps, you have to do nothing but train.
Yeah.
Like someone's cooking for you. There's recovery stations, there's massage, there's once again educational sessions along with them, and you can get a lot out of that. But I've also seen people get destroyed in these camps.
Yeah, sure.
Because they take on more than their body can actually handle. So it could be a really good training block, but it could also be, if you go, if you're not used to, let's say you train 20 hours that week and you're a 10-hour a week kind of person, that's a lot of extra wear and tear on your body.
Yeah,
but still
extra calories you got to pump in there. So, but this is funny. I mean, the cost can just keep going, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things that we do that support our triathlon. But I think the way that at least my wife and I have looked at it is a lot of times our big races that's our vacation.
Yep.
And so we are, going to a destination race, and that becomes sort of a vacation on top of doing a race. And so we've always enjoyed, like when we go somewhere, that we start exploring the area either before or after a race. And we've got some different, ways that we try to, build in some travel time around a race. And then it becomes, this is something you and I talk about a lot, then it becomes a lifestyle. And then that lifestyle for me doesn't cost as much, if that makes sense. Even though I may be paying the dollar, I'm enjoying the lifestyle, I'm enjoying the traveling, I'm enjoying camping,
Yep.
and traveling and then racing. So in fact, I'm camping because I'm racing. So if I wasn't racing, I probably would not be camping. So this is a good excuse to get the trailer out and use it. So there's, it's looking at it from a different lens. It's still the same dollar, but at the end of the day, it's still it's something that I enjoy doing, and I know you do as well. And sometimes that makes it a little less painful.
I always think of it, as an investment, right?
Mhm.
Everything I spend in triathlon is an investment in my health and
Yeah.
my mental health and my physical health,
Mhm.
right? You and I both have spent once again a lot of money in this, but I can guarantee, like, your metabolic health is really quite good.
Right.
Right? My metabolic health is good, right? We're not going to get type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
I mean, we're not probably going to get cardiovascular disease, hopefully, right? Sorry,
Struggling.
struggling with that. But
No.
but all of these diseases of lifestyle,
Mhm.
of like the standard American lifestyle with the standard American diet, um, doing multi-sport or even doing any activity, right? Um, is an investment in your health and
Mhm.
your long-term well-being.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's part of the reason that I don't mind spending money on these
Yeah.
things.
Right. Mhm.
It truly is a way long-term probably to save money,
Mhm.
you know. And anytime I always say this, anytime I'm doing something that is truly investing in my health, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because you only have one life, right?
Right.
And I want that life to be, what's the word, we talked about it before. I want to have a long health lifespan or health
Mhm.
span. What do you call
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Like, I don't want to necessarily live long. I want to
Mhm.
live healthy.
Mhm.
And, so yeah, health span, I think we call it.
Yeah.
And, both of us, we've talked about it before. One of our goals is to be the oldest guy in the race,
Yep.
right?
Love
If
it.
I'm in my 80s and I can toe a start line somewhere,
That's right.
I'm winning. Like,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Or you could say one at that point. So.
I won. Like, I feel like I won life at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And so all of these things we're doing now, I think, are really investing in
Mhm.
our health.
Well, and let me just add, and not to get negative on it, but this is why we wanted to talk about it, because it is important to recognize the costs that sneak in on you. And
Yep.
before you know it, you're paying, 4 different membership fees for 4 different online services, and that can start causing stress at the home front.
Yep.
And if you don't have that worked out, or maybe you don't really realize how much you're putting in, you got to take a step back and say, is this investment the right thing to be doing at this time in your financial state? Don't go into debt for triathlon's sake. I mean, there's ways to get around the sport and still be able to achieve goals that you probably never dreamed of without having to buy that $15,000 bike, or that, extra, gold plated shoe or whatever it is. You know, it's, there's still a lot of benefit of training the engine. And that really trumps a lot of some of the gear that we do spend money on. So keep, it is smart to look at the budget, make sure that triathlon is not adding stress to your home life, your financial situation, or your relationships. It's more important to be enjoying the sport for the sake of enjoying the sport.
I have a good friend that he trains for triathlon but never races.
No, well, yeah,
He just loves it. He
yeah,
loves to bike and run. He used to
yeah,
race,
Yeah.
And he said, well, one day I might get back in racing, but he's like, I really enjoy the training.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The racing is, it's okay. But he's like, I enjoy swimming. I enjoy biking. I enjoy
Yep.
running. I think they complement each other very well.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's in his 60s.
And that's what adds life, adds to his life. Yeah.
Yeah, it adds to his life. So that's the other side of things, right?
Mm.
You don't have to, like, you can do swim, bike, and run,
Yeah.
and not do the racing side. And when you're not doing the racing, well, then you probably don't need like to upgrade your bike, and you don't need to, well, you don't need to travel. You don't probably need a coach at that point, right?
No.
Like
Right.
you can do swim, bike, and run relatively inexpensively.
Yep.
As well.
Yep. Totally.
Awesome.
All right. I think that's a good place to wrap up. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. I absolutely think so too. So that was great. Hey, John, we're all thinking of you, and hope you have a good race this weekend. And remember, we got next weekend, we got Pumpkin Man, the last local
Yep.
race coming up. The UNLV Tri Club is going to have some of the
Yep.
athletes out there. So if you see them, wish them well. If they have questions along the way, I'm going to be there trying to answer. So actually a little bit of news, I'm actually racing Pumpkin Man.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. I'm doing a relay, and if you would have ever asked me if I would do the swim portion of a triathlon relay, I'd have said you're crazy.
Oh, look at that.
But that's all I can do right now is do the swim. So I found a team, and we're called the Princesses of Pain.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
That's the team name. Yeah, I just found a team that would take me.
I love it.
So yeah, I'm excited to get back and actually toe a start line, even if it is my
That's
worst
great.
of the
great.
disciplines. So
Awesome. That's exciting.
yeah, so
Good stuff.
it is exciting. Okay, hey John, have a great weekend down
thanks.
there, and look forward to talking next week and hearing about your race.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.